Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the Asteraceae family, which is the largest family in North America, and we'll be talking about the Anthemideae and Heliantheae tribes. The Asteraceae family was formerly known as the Compositae family because its inflorescence is a head made of a composite of flowers or many flowers, or and it's capitulate surrounded by involucral bracts, so that kind of like circular it cups and holds in that kind of composite flower. And so in that composite flower, there's often disc flowers and ray flowers, which we'll review in a little bit. There's about 13 subfamilies and over 1,600 genres. And currently there's over almost 24,000 accepted species. But we continue to describe and find more species all the time. These include very common species that you may be familiar with, like daisies and sunflowers, sagebrushes, yarrow, fleabane, chrysanthemums, dahlias, zinnias, and heleniums. So the first tribe in Asteraceae we're going to talk about is the Anthemideae tribe, which includes sagebrushes like Artemisia frigata, which is what you're going to be responsible for knowing on page 232, and Artemisia tridentata, a super common sagebrush species, big sagebrush. It's found all over our country. So first up we have fringed sagebrush or Artemisia frigata, one of those. It is a native perennial species and it grows as a cool season subshrub up to about 40 centimeters tall. It usually can be semi-erect to decumbent, which again means it's kind of going downwards and then up, and it can also be mat forming. It usually flowers from August to September and primarily reproduces through seeds. So Artemisia frigida, or fringed sagebrush, also known as prairie sagebrush in some areas, has a inflorescence type that is often panicled or racemed, and they often are also leafy and well extended above this kind of leafy mat that you see below. The heads themselves are sessile and they're nodding, and so you can kind of see that they're nodding off to the side here. The flowers are, there are two different types of flowers, like I mentioned previously. Asters have ray flowers and disc flowers. In this case, the heads are inconspicuously radiate, which means the ray flowers are really hard to see, which are essentially those petals you typically see in the sunflower, whereas the center, or what we see in this one, like kind of like what you might expect to become sunflower seeds in the sunflower plant, those are called disc flowers, and those produce a different type of seed as well. So the ray flowers that again that are inconspicuous, which might be like those sunflower petals that kind of would occur on the edges, are what we call pistillate, and so they become seeds and they receive pollen, but they don't produce pollen. Whereas the disc flowers in the center are perfect and tubular, and they have both the pollen bearing and pollen receiving portions of the plant, so the stamen and the pistils. The involucral, again, that kind of cup that kind of goes at the base of these flowers or the corollas, and it kind of like is a modified leaf that kind of wraps around. Involucral is kind of like a cup shape, and it's also loosely tomentose, which again is kind of this soft white hair feel. The fruits are a keen, which again, if you don't remember, is a single kind of dry fruit, kind of like, for example, what you expect of a sunflower seed. They are subcylindrical in shape, and Artemisia frigida, has no pappus. So the pappus is that kind of white stuff you see on a dandelion that helps disperse a seed and for it to fly away in the environment. And so fringed sagebrush has akene seeds without pappus. So Artemisia frigida, or again, prairie or fringed sagebrush, has leaves that alternate in fascicles. If you forget what fascicles are, essentially think about a pine tree. It's a bunch of little leaves that come out of a single section or a single spot. They're often simple and pinnately divided, And so here we can kind of see how these leaves are pinnately divided, oddly pinnate. The segments are linear to filiform, and filiform is similar to linear but more thin and thread-like. And then there's also a fringy part of that fringed sagebrush, as you can kind of see in the close-up of the leaves there. Oftentimes, it's crowded below, and the leaves are more scattered above, and it has petioles in kind of the lower areas, whereas above it is less likely to be petioled and more likely to be sessile or subsessile. The blade outlines are rounded, as we can kind of again see in this kind of close-up of the plant. You can also again see that kind of tomentose kind of hair. The stems have twigs that are branching at the base, and the upper twigs are often herbaceous and again tomentose. The entire plant is tomentose and aromatic. Sagebrushes, artemisias are very well known for creating these aromatic volatile oils, which sometimes can make it harder for certain grazers. Historically speaking, fringed sagebrush was used as bandages, mats, for menstrual pads, toilet paper, fans, and to eliminate the greasy smell from dried meat. In terms of its forage value, Artemisia frigida is fair to good for sheep and goats and pronghorn, so browsers and intermediate feeders, but it's not great for grazers like cattle or maybe horses. It is also important winter feed for, again, these browsers and intermediate feeders, elk and deer, and can increase rapidly under heavy grazing because oftentimes, like we mentioned before, all animals, cows included, have selectivity and they will go for what tastes good, what is easy to digest, and they'll avoid things, with a lot of volatile chemicals that are hard to digest. And so because of that, Artemisia frigida could be protected from grazing and could rapidly increase in areas with heavy grazing. It is a drought-tolerant plant, though, and that's an important consideration for some areas. It typically occurs in habitats such as prairies, foothills, and plains, and is mostly abundant in well-drained and sandy or rocky soils. Occasionally, it's also planted as an ornamental because it makes a really nice matted ground cover and has a nice smell. Our next plant species is going to be big sagebrush, or Artemisia tridentata. This is one of the most common sagebrush species across the globe and the most common in North America, and populates a large portion of the Great Basin ecosystems and rangelands. It's a perennial native as well, and it's evergreen. In terms of its growth, it typically grows as a shrub that can get up to 6 meters tall, and it grows generally highly erect and highly branched, and so it's pretty rigid. The crown at the top is often rounded or can be spreading. The trunk itself often is short, and it flowers from August to September and reproduces primarily from seeds. Big sagebrush, or Artemisia tridentata, has an inflorescence with heads that are often very narrow and have very leafy panicled clusters, as you can kind of see here in these types of images, with these kind of flowers that are heavily panicled and then kind of these small leafy appendages that are kind of in between these different inflorescence and flower heads. The heads are often numerous, as we can see, and they can either be erect or they can also droop slightly. And oftentimes they're subsessile and weakly petioled. The flowers themselves consist of perfect disc flowers, and the heads are often discoid or disc-shaped, and it has an avuncular with 4-5 series or rows of bracts, which again are modified leaves. The fruits themselves again are achene, and the pappus are absent, so that's kind of that fluffy stuff that helps seeds fly away. Achene again is a single dry seed. Vegetatively speaking, the leaves of big sagebrush are alternate in how they are arranged, and they are simple and not compounded. The blades are often narrowly obdeltoid, and so that's the opposite of a deltoid shape. And it's often three-lobed, as we can kind of see at the tip of these leaves. One, two, three. Gradually, it tapers from the apex, and it gets more narrow at the base. It's a silvery canescent color, and again, that's kind of like a silvery white color on top of green, often associated with kind of like a glow, and often has kind of like this kind of hair associated with it as well. The stems have twigs that are round and rigid, and often green above or higher up, and brown below or lower down, closer to the soil. The bark itself can often be gray to brown and shred into long, flat strips. The entire plant is aromatic, and there are several recognized subspecies and/or varieties. Historically speaking, big sagebrush, Artemisia trientata, was once harvested to be used as thatch or firewood. It's also used as a laxative, so don't eat too much. Uh, the forage is good for sheep, intermediate feeders, and wildlife, mostly browsers, that have that adaptation to handle volatile oils. It is sometimes can be fair for cattle, and it just kind of depends where and when the volatile oils accumulate. And it's often high in protein, which is kind of why it can still be fair, but it's high also in volatile oils, as I've mentioned. The food sources and cover are also really important for sage grouse, and which is a really important bird species, and many other wildlife species in the Great Basin region. Here's a cute little photo of a sage grouse above me. In terms of its habitat, big sagebrush typically occurs in valleys, plains, basins, and mountain slopes. It's mostly abundant in dry and well-drained and gravelly or rocky soils, but like I mentioned, it is very common throughout the Great Basin. In terms of livestock losses, it can sometimes cause rumen stasis, or basically interrupt microbial processes in the rumen because of the volatile oils. And so it might not be the best always for grazers like cattle or other grazers, horses, etc. Okay, next we are going to be moving on to the Heliantheae tribe within Asteraceae, which consists of the sunflowers. It's the third largest tribe in Asteraceae, and it's divided into as many as 35 subtribes, and it's obviously, hopefully, very familiar to you. There's 190 genres, there's 2,500 species and counting, and they're mostly found in North and South America with kind of recent adaptive radiation or rapid evolution within this tribe. Like I mentioned, it consists of sunflower plants, and Helianthus is the Greek word for sunflower. It's also very commonly used, of course, because it's a sunflower family or tribe, very commonly used as garden flowers, and also sometimes for food production, like sunflower seeds. It also consists of common weeds like ambrosia or ragweed. So the one species you're going to be responsible for knowing in the Heliantheae tribe is going to be arrowleaf balsam root, or Balsamorhiza sagittata. Sorry. The leaves themselves are shaped like arrows, as we can kind of see in the image above me, which is how it gets its name sagittata, which means arrowleaf. Balsam means aromatic, and we all know what rhiza or root means. It means root, and that's because arrowleaf balsam root has a very distinctive aromatic root. In terms of its stats, it's a perennial native plant that is a cool season species and grows as a cool season form that gets from 20 to 80 centimeters tall. It has a giant taproot, which is often thickened, often with an exfoliating codex, which means it might peel back. It flowers typically from May to August and reproduces from seeds. Arrowleaf balsam root, or Balsamorhiza sagittata, has a inflorescence that produces big, large, showy flowers that are solitary or paired, usually 1 to 2 per peduncle, as we can see in the image above me or to that side of me. It's often long, and it has a tomentose peduncle. We already discussed what tomentose is. Peduncle is kind of the stalk that holds flowers up that connects it to the plant. Flowers themselves, the heads are radiate. You can see these ray flowers very well. So here you can see the ray flowers, which are these yellow, what we think of as petals sometimes. These yellow petals are ray flowers. And on the center, those are disc flowers. The flowers themselves have heads that have this involucre, again, these modified leaves that cup the flower, that are radiate and highly tomentose, densely tomentose. So again, that's a soft, white, hairy type of feel. The ray flowers might have anywhere between, there might be anywhere between 13 to 21 ray flowers, or again, you might think of them as petals, but they're actually flowers with with reproductive capabilities. And oftentimes they're pistillate, and they're yellow, and they're apexed and 3 to 5 toothed. The disc flowers in the center are perfect flowers, which have, again, both the stamens and the anthers and the pistils. And oftentimes the corolla is tubular and also yellow. And again, this is the disc flower, the stuff in the center of the flower. The fruits are also achene. They're glabrous, which no hair, and they, again, no pappus on this plant. Here's another nice view of a balsam root, and again, here's the involucre that you can kind of see that's densely tomentose, and you can kind of see how it cups the flower. And again, we see here are the ray petals or flowers and the disc flowers inside. Both of these flower types make different types of seeds. And here is some animation of where the involucre is, in a close-up and from upper view. The peduncle is, again, that stem that holds and connects that flower to the plant. So here is a great view of balsam root, or Balsamorhiza sagittata. In terms of its vegetation characteristics, it has leaves that are often alternate and simple, and usually form large basal clumps. So it comes out of the base. These basal blades are often cordate, which is heart-shaped, to sagittate, which is arrow-shaped, to triangular. The apexes, the edges, the end tips of the leaves are acute, a sharp angle, and the margins are entire, so there's no serration along the edges of the leaf, and it has a silvery canescent to tomentose, hairy feel and color to it, as you can see in the photo above me. It is colline, which means it grows out of a central base stem. It has very few blades, and oftentimes they're reduced and narrow and bract-like. The stems themselves are what we call scapiform, which are semi-leafless, but usually with several reduced leaves. It is also tomentose, usually arising from a large basal cluster of leaves. Historically speaking, it was boiled, Balsamorhiza sagittata, or arrowleaf balsam root, was boiled by the Cheyenne people to the roots, the stems, and the leaves, and basically they drank it for stomach pains and headaches. The plants can also be steamed and inhaled. The vapor can be inhaled for similar purposes, and oftentimes the ripe seeds can be made into flowers, whereas roots can be eaten raw or boiled. In terms of its forage value, it's good for sheep and big game, and also okay for cattle when it's green. And the flowers are the most palatable portion of this plant. In terms of its habitat, it occurs in plains, valleys, hillsides, and open woodlands, and typically occurs in moderately mostly abundant in deep and well-drained soil at moderate and high elevation. Okay, well, that's it for this week. I hope you guys all have a great Veterans Day weekend, and make sure you comment on your favorite aster tribe in this lecture and your favorite term. See you soon.